Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. My special guest is Scott Shepard, who appeared on the show last month for a discussion on white supremacist organizations and the death threats he's received for speaking out against hate groups and their leaders. As stated in the previous episode, Shepard was a member of the Ku Klux Klan and served as Imperial Wizard, Grand Wizard, and national leader of the Omerta Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. His other affiliations included the National Association for the Advancement of White People and the European American Unity Rights Organization. Shepard created the National White Rights Association and the White Rights Organization. The Mississippi native also had connections to pro-white organizations in South Africa and other countries. These connections included extremist and anti-government groups. Some were labeled militia or mercenary groups and were considered paramilitary, such as the Civilian Military Assistance Group, CMA, and anti-government and anti-communist organizations with operations in Central America. Shepard was a candidate for state representative and governor in the state of Tennessee in the late 80s and early 90s, and proudly campaigned as a white nationalist. In this final episode of 2013, which is part of my Hate in America feature series, Shepard will explain how white supremacists have managed to infiltrate the Democratic and Republican Party, influence legislation, and provide campaign contributions to elected officials who secretly support the white supremacist agenda. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Shepard.
I'm glad to be back.
Before we get into what I refer to as the politics of hate, I'd like to set the tone for this interview by tossing out a few names of white supremacist organizations and get your assessment on the danger they pose to this country. The White Citizens Council.
White Citizens Council was formed in 1954, approximately 1954, and actually it was formed in Indianola, Mississippi, made up of a lot of businessmen in the community and the Delta area. The White Citizens Council grew from the period of integration, and of course they actually controlled a lot of the politicians and politics and throughout the state of Mississippi and other states in the South, controlling elections and trying to prevent blacks from voting. And of course they were trying to boost the support of pro-white, is what I call it, pro-white candidates that were running for public office in the state of Mississippi. They also were, of course, a lot of people labeled them a white-collar Ku Klux Klan. And actually they were, of course, they were actually white-collar Ku Klux Klan. And they weren't really responsible for any violence of their own, but they encouraged it, and they did work hand in hand with the Ku Klux Klan. The White Citizens Council grew, and of course it progressed over the years. People think that the White Citizens Council has died and gone away, but it hasn't. The White Citizens Council still is alive today, but they just changed the name. Today they call it the Council of Conservative Citizens. They try to say that, they're not associated with the past White Citizens Council. They're not the same organization, but that's totally false. They're the same organization, just a different name with the same goals that they had back in the 60s and 70s.
And what would you cite as evidence to confirm that they're still the same old organization as it once was?
Well, they're the same organization. I was a member. They changed the name from the citizens, actually what they were, a White Citizens Council, to the Council of Conservative Citizens. They even programs of, separation of the races that they did as White Citizens Council. They're trying to portray themselves as a patriotic organization, civic organization in these different cities and communities, when they're preaching the same thing that the White Citizens Council did. And the only reason they changed the name is because of the bad publicity that the White Citizens Council got back in the 60s, because the White Citizens Council supported people like Byron De La Beckwith, who I told you murdered Medgar Evers. They also backed Sam Bowers, who was part of the White Knights of Mississippi. And of course, I believe personally that, and there is some evidence that the White Citizens Council was involved in the murder of the 3 civil rights workers in Philadelphia, Mississippi. So, like I said, that trying to sidestep the bad publicity from the 1960s, or actually 50s, 60s, and 70s White Citizens Council, and by name change. And, of course, like I said, I was a member of that organization, so I know it's the same one. And I'll be honest with you, my grandfather on my mother's side was a businessman in the Mississippi Delta, and I think that he was also a member of the White Citizens Council of that day.
And speaking of the KKK, what would you consider to be the most dangerous group that's active now?
The most dangerous group today, I would say, would probably be the Imperial Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. I believe it is. They out of Kentucky. They involved themselves with these Nazi organizations too. They allow the Nazis to come in and be a part of their organization. That, of course, that organization, a lot of the Klan groups years ago would say, no, we're not getting involved with any kind of drugs or anything like that. But that, of course, we touched on something earlier. That's one of the ways that they are funding themselves. Years ago, the Klan, they stayed away from drugs and things like that. But this, recently, just 2 years ago, the head of that Ku Klux Klan was indicted, and I think he's sent to prison for trafficking drugs. They, of course, they were also sued by the Southern Poverty Law Center because some of their members had committed some terrible acts of violence and ended in a result of some severe injuries and possibly deaths. I'm not sure on that, but I know there was some severe injuries.
National Association for the Advancement of White People.
National Association for the Advancement of White People was formed by David Duke. Of course, David Duke was the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. He left the Ku Klux Klan, and actually on bad terms because, I consider him now today a charlatan and, a fraud because, he got caught trying to sell the membership list of his organization to another Klan member. And of course, he was caught on tape doing that. But anyway, he left the Klan and formed the National Association for the Advancement of White People. That organization lasted for a number of years, and it was a step up of David Duke trying to separate himself from the Ku Klux Klan. They preached the same thing as the Klan did, but they were supported and did have more of a white-collar membership. The National Association for the Advancement of White People is now, they still exist, but not under the leadership of David Duke. He kind of left that organization or turned it over to someone else to form the European American Unity Rights Organization. But the NAAWP still exists, but they're pretty much now, a organization that's, they're not doing too much because of the leadership of David Duke leaving them.
And you just mentioned the European, what was it?
European American Unity Rights Organization. That was also formed by David Duke after he left the NAAWP or turned it over to, another group of people. And of course, that organization still is in operation today. It's not really a strong organization because David Duke is mainly promoting David Duke. You can go online and punch in davidduke.com. He's got his own website. And then, of course, there is whitecivilrights.com, and that is the European American Unity Rights Organization website. But he's more promoting his own website and more promoting David Duke than he is at European American Unity Rights Organization. Is just mainly an organization to raise money.
And that's based here in the States, or is that also international?
The headquarters is in Louisiana, but yes, I'm sure he'd have contact in the States and also overseas. They drew support from all over, and like I said, it's not any different than the Klan, but it did draw more of a white collar membership, lawyers, doctors, and things of that nature.
The Aryan Brotherhood.
The Aryan Brotherhood, very dangerous organization. Of course, they're very involved in the prisons. Not only do they, have the white supremacy beliefs and stuff, but, that's not all that they're all about. They're all about murder, drug trafficking. they're into all kinds of crime and things of that nature. Because I got a friend that's involved in the prison system in Texas who is I won't give the position that they hold, but they're involved in the Texas prison system. And one of the things they have to do when they go into this prison system as an employee, of course, they are trained on the Aryan Brotherhood. They are brought, given information about them because they are one of the most dangerous, violent, deadly white supremacist organizations that exist right now today, because they reach not only in prison, but they are reaching out into the communities. And I think we've recently seen that with the murder of some prosecutors in, I think it was Colorado, and even in Texas. Texas has got their own segment of the Aryan Brotherhood, and they, like I said, they're one of the most dangerous and scary organizations there are out there.
And how do the neo-Nazis rank in relation to the Aryan Brotherhood?
Well, neo-Nazis, of course, you got the National Socialist movement, and the neo-Nazis are some of the Klan organizations tried to separate themselves from the neo-Nazis, but then some kind of embrace them. But the neo-Nazis are also a very violent organization because they also have the skinhead mentality, and they also have the skinheads as members of the neo-Nazi organizations because skinheads are Nazis. And they are street thugs. I guess you'd call them the foot soldiers of some of these white supremacist organizations. They go out and commit acts of violence on the streets. They also are, were part of course, Ron Edwards, who had that Imperial Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. He embraced a lot of the skinheads, and some of the skinheads were also responsible for the violent acts that I think that he was sued for by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The neo-Nazi organization, of course, it's growing too. It's growing, and it's a dangerous situation that, of course, they are within our prison systems like the Aryan Brotherhood. They're not as ruthless as the Aryan Brotherhood, but they are still a violent organization.
Now, you stated these groups are growing. What would you attribute for the growth?
Well, economics has something to do with it. And then, of course, they will tell you that the election of President Obama has helped the organizations grow. And I believe that's true to a certain extent. It's brought out a lot of people that said, we got a black president now, we thought we'd never see this. Now America's going to go down the tubes. And people with that mentality had not come out publicly or whatever, now have joined these organizations and come out and started speaking, joining the forces with these white supremacists. That, and also access to internet and, a lot more communications. They're able to reach further out into the communities, cities, and, that's brought a lot of people into the movement because people can just click on the internet and just click on a white supremacist organization, neo-Nazis, KKK, or anything like that, and if they agree with it, they can join them.
Based on everything you just stated about these groups, they still pose a very significant threat to the security of this country, but yet the majority of Americans still view them as nothing more than fringe groups with a relatively small membership. Why do you think that is? Is there any explanation that you could come up with for that?
Yeah, I like to explain to you this way, and I'm glad you brought this up because the white supremacist movement is not just what I would call cow pasture Klansmen out in the middle of a cow pasture lighting crosses or something like that. It's not just that. The white supremacist movement there is a underground high tech network out there that's working, on behalf of a lot of white supremacist groups to further their cause. A lot of them are underground, but it's what we see is the Ku Klux Klan and the cow pasture Klansmen is growing, but right now the membership is low. But that's not the entire white supremacist movement. You've got a white supremacist movement that is high tech, using computer systems. They're communicating with other white supremacists all over the country, and they are planning activities such as, race war. It's not just a cow pasture Klansman, it's a high-tech system out there.
And you mentioned that drugs was one of the methods that they're using to fund their organizations. Are there any others, like maybe prostitution or illegal gambling, do you know?
I do know that the drug traffic has surfaced, and they are involved with that. A lot of the money that's raised with these organizations, they recruit, they require their members to pay dues, and there's also a segment out there of people who can't join these organizations for the position that they're in, as far as their job, their public life. But a lot of these people that have contributed to these organizations are doctors and lawyers that can't join the organization because of their status in the community, but they are funding these white supremacist groups.
Are you aware of any corporations or members of the Democratic or Republican Party that have contributed to these groups?
Well, I'll say this. I won't say that actually the Republican Party or the Democratic Party themselves have contributed. Members, now the white supremacist movement, sure, I mean, of course, it's considered right-wing. They can, they would like to, put the Republican Party over in the right wing. But I can tell you this, that there's a lot of Democratic members that have contributed to the white supremacist organization also. Now, a lot of people think that the white supremacist organizations are made up mainly, of course, right-wing people, and they consider, people of the Republican Party, right-wing party or far right-wing party. But white supremacist organizations is not made up completely of right-wing. There are some Democrats that are contributing to this white supremacist movement. So it's not just a Republican or Democrat. You get independents, Democrats, Republicans contributing to this movement. Not only Republican Party and not only Democratic Party, but you also got these individuals party that, one party that stands out in my mind, and it goes back a number of years, is the Populist Party. The Populist Party was nothing but a white supremacist organization. They considered themselves American First Party, worry about America first and other countries later, but they were still a white supremacist organization. When I was going to run for the governor of the state of Tennessee, I was recruited by the Populist Party and was going to be a candidate for the Populist Party. And somewhere in the midst of the campaign, I changed parties and went with the Republican Party. The Republican Party they didn't have a candidate running in the election against the Democrats. So right at the last minute, I took advantage of the Republican Party. I jumped right in and, filed and became the Republican Party candidate for governor. So, sure, they definitely infiltrated. David Duke at first started out as independent Populist Party or another independent party, but he ended up running as a Republican in the state of Louisiana and, of course, won the House seat in Louisiana. So they're being, yes, it's being infiltrated in all directions in all states by white supremacist members that are seeking to be elected to public office.
Speaking of potential political candidates, let's fast forward to 2016. Several polls were conducted to determine which Republican candidate would have the best chance of winning the presidential election if Hillary Clinton was the Democratic Party's nominee. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul was mentioned as someone that could pose a serious threat to Clinton. However, Kentucky has a notorious history with regard to the Klan and lynching. Do you think this fact, coupled with the controversy surrounding the racist newsletter associated with Ron Paul, the senator's father, would make many black voters in Kentucky and the country think twice about voting for Rand Paul if he were to run for president?
Oh, definitely. I would think so. Rand Paul is. Of course, I'll be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about him, and of course I may take a lot of criticism for speaking out against Rand Paul by friends of mine, but that's okay too. I'm speaking the truth as I see it. Of course, Rand Paul, he borders on the fringe of not only right wing but ultra right wing, and when you get over into the ultra right wing, you get over into the segment of politics that is controlled, or maybe not be controlled, but is influenced a lot by white supremacist organizations. So yes, I think he would be a threat.
During the heyday of the Jim Crow and Civil Rights period, high-ranking state and local law enforcement representatives were members or supporters of the Ku Klux Klan. Many proudly proclaimed that they belonged to generations of Klansmen or Klan supporters, and some, like the infamous Bull Connor, went to extreme measures to protect Klan members that were charged with assault and other crimes against blacks. Given the fact that you were one of the most active, influential, and visible Klan leaders in the country, would you say the Bull-Connor system is still in effect in many small towns with a history of racial segregation and strife?
Yes, it's still present today. I'll also say there's been a lot of progress made within these cities, small towns. Like my hometown of Indianola, Mississippi, of course, it was one of those cities. But you go into the city of Indianola that once was divided by, railroad tracks. Whites lived on one side and blacks lived on the other. But now all that has changed, and then of course I contribute that to the fact that Indianola is the birthplace of B.B. King. And of course, B.B. King has played a big impact on racial unity within the, city of Indianola, Mississippi. But getting away from the city of Indianola, yes, of course, you go down to Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the White Knights of Mississippi and the 3 civil rights workers were murdered. You go into Philadelphia, Mississippi, and it's still a very, very, segregated city, and they just want to avoid the issue that the civil rights workers were killed down there. And yes, they still protect some of the people down there and of that system. Definitely still in the small towns.
How concerned should President Obama be about an attempt on his life, given the fact that these groups are out there?
There's already been, some attempts on President Obama's life. Right here in Tennessee, there was, they arrested several people. I think back during his first term, early part of his first term, right here in Tennessee, that were plotting to assassinate President Obama. That is always a threat. And of course, with President Obama, he's a high target because of his race and that he's the first, black president this country has had. So if I was President Obama, I would take any death threats serious because, they're going to go after President Obama before they will anybody else. And, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how to answer that other than by saying it's already been planned, and attempted. And the ones that have been arrested that were planning this, they're not the only ones out there. These whack jobs are out there, and they would strike any minute. So Obama needs to take everything pretty serious. And like I said, I don't know how to really answer that.
No, I understand.
And because it's a very serious situation because it's already been planned. And as I said before, people have been arrested for it, and they're not the only ones out there.
No. But the reason why I raised the question is because I'm well aware that attempts have been made and that he's received the most death threats of any president that served. However, when stories like these break, there are a number of people in America who look at the stories and they go, oh, okay, that's just a couple of whack jobs. They kind of justify it as that, as opposed to looking at it and say, you know what, there could be something more significant here. Maybe these guys are part of a group that are out to get the president, and that gets overlooked because, again, so many view these groups and their members as nothing but people that are part of a fringe sect, and they really can't do any harm.
Well, you're right. And then, of course, you brought up something else that popped into my mind. Sure, they're not associated with any organizations, but they could have been in the past. And this goes back to people like Tom Metzger and other organizations and the United Klans of America, which doesn't exist anymore, but there is another United Klans of America that is claiming to be part of the original organization. But what I'm getting at is these people have been sued by the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Imperial Knights, the United Klans of America, Tom Metzger, and then, of course, using Tom Metzger again as an example, he promotes the lone wolf tactics. Don't associate with any organization. Don't join an organization. If you're going to act alone. And these people that are acting alone, you don't know what their background is, and you don't know who they were associated with or in contact with. They may not hold official membership with someone, but they could still be associated with someone. I believe that Votes Front is one of those. They did away with the membership process, wasn't going to have a membership list. You didn't join them. You were just associated with them. And the only reason they're doing that is to protect themselves from these lawsuits that the Southern Poverty Law Center is filing against them and bankrupting them with $1 million judgments. But yes, these people that are out there, no, they're not just crackpots, and they're not just people acting alone. They could be, some of these lone wolf warriors, as they call them, that are associated or have been associated with major big white supremacist organizations.
If a candidate, political candidate, someone that was running for office or someone that's currently holding office, be they Democrat or Republican, if they wanted to contribute to one of the white supremacist organizations and wanted to do it in a roundabout fashion, how would they go about doing it?
Well, if they wanted to contribute to the white supremacist organizations, a lot of times they just do it. These white supremacist organizations, the donations that they get are, they're not going to publish where it came from.
Right.
They're not going to publish where it came from. All that's secret. And what they'll do is, a lot of these politicians, they really have no fear of that are deeply embedded into that mind concept or contributing to these white supremacist organizations, because they already know how these organizations work. Their donation will not be made public. But those that are afraid of it, they go a roundabout way and have other people donate on their behalf, and then they come back and then they reimburse this person. It's a crazy network. It's a crazy network, and like I said, you're not dealing with just cow pasture Klansmen out there burning crosses. You're dealing with a high-tech network, and they got the system down pat, and they're running, they're running circles around a lot of these people that are trying to investigate them, because they know the system and they are high-tech, and they're not uneducated people. You got some highly educated people, and they know the system.
Given everything that you've just stated during this interview, particularly about the donation aspect of all this, have you ever considered testifying before Congress in order to possibly get legislation enacted to where they will pass a law or at least introduce a bill indicating anybody suspected or contributing to these organizations should be removed from office?
Well, I've never been asked to do that, and be honest with you, I've never really thought about it until you've mentioned it. Now, if that came, or was presented to me, sure, I would definitely do it. Like I said, I haven't even given that any thought because it hadn't crossed my mind. I'm glad you mentioned it because it, gave me something to think about. But yes, I would definitely be willing to do it. I think we in our interview we talked before, you asked me, you said, let me see how you put it, some people say a leopard never changes his spots.
Correct.
And then you asked me, you said, what will you do, or what are you willing to do? And I'll use the term to prove myself, and you didn't use that term. I did. I'm using it to convince people, that I'm hurt personally. Myself has changed. Yes, that would be something that I would definitely do. And if it's ever presented to me, sure, definitely.
Once again, I'd like to thank you for appearing on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and I thank you for taking part on this ongoing series, which I'm sure is helping a lot of people to learn more about the subculture that's out there regarding the white supremacists. So thank you very much.
I appreciate you allowing me to, come back on, and I hope it does help some people with this, this thing that we got going in white supremacist organizations, and racism is a disease. And if we can, like I said before, if we can reach one person and steer them in a different direction, educate other people on what's going on within these groups, and even the government people that, like you said, maybe monitor some of this stuff. If they can see what's going on out there, they can take steps to prevent it. And, that's my goal. If we can stop this mess and help one person, hey, I'm happy.
Thank you again, Mr. Shepard. I also thank all of the fans and supporters of the show. I even thank those who took the time to indicate that they didn't like me or my show. Why? I thank them because this show welcomes all opinions, as long as they're respectful, and supports free speech. Most importantly, this show is not here to judge anyone or to tell you how or what to think about a particular news story or person. Its goal is to present important news and information so that you can make informed decisions about issues that may concern you and your family. For those that may not be aware, the G-Man Interviews, an independent news and information source based in Harlem, New York, is a one-man operation. I have no staff and have not received ad revenue, compensation, or funding for the 25 episodes that have been produced since the show was launched back in January of this year. In its first year, the show was acknowledged and praised via an official letter by the South Korean government for its coverage of the Korean conflict, and another episode played a crucial role in the U.S. Justice Department's decision to launch an investigation into possible civil rights violations by the Omaha Police Department. Recently, an episode on military suicides was lauded by officials at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and another episode helped a homeless woman who was living in a junkyard obtain permanent housing. The woman was also reunited with her 14-year-old daughter. Finally, I'm happy to note that the G-Man Interviews is competing to become a finalist at this year's Webby Awards, which is considered the Oscars of the Internet world. The category I'm hoping to be nominated in is Best Online News and Information Series Video. Simply put, I'm truly proud of what this show has been able to accomplish in its first year, and in 2014, I'll continue in my effort to provide real news, real issues, and real sources. I'm the G-Man, and I wish you and your family a very happy new year. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.